Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Riegelman again. I'm a social sciences librarian at the University of Minnesota. Some of what I plan to talk about regarding pre-registration and HARK, hypothesizing after results are known, was covered already in the lovely keynote by Melissa Ruffleson. And so I might fly through some of those things and get done a little bit early. So to set the stage here, I'm planning to introduce pre-registration, give some definitions. Then I'm going to talk about how it varies from registered reports. And then I'm going to close with a more strident approach to trying to convince you that there should be a registered report submission tracks within LIS journals. Okay, so first, pre-registration is basically following the scientific method where you're designing your study, designing your experiment, and declaring your research plan and or analysis plan before you start gathering your data. And so this is thought of as a way to differentiate between exploratory and confirmatory. So it's great to play around, to become familiar with things, but at some point you should draw a line in the sand and move on to confirmatory. Another way to describe this is differentiating between hypothesis generating and hypothesis testing. So what in the heck does this have to do with reproducibility? Well, it is thought to thwart known questionable research practices. So Melissa talked a little bit about this. I really like the article that's cited at the bottom of the slide here by Dorothy Bishop, Rein in the Four Horsemen of Irreproducibility. And she focuses on these four QRPs: HARK, Underpowered Studies, Bias Against the Null, and PHacking. And so I'm going to explain a little bit more about each of these and bring it back to why I think this would help thwart the reproducibility replication crisis.
Hi, Amy, sorry to interrupt. Can you talk just a little bit louder? We have a comment request.
Sure. So HARK is defined as presenting a post hoc hypothesis and then reporting it as if it was your a priori hypothesis. And so it's really going against the scientific method where one is doing the experiment, looking at the results, and then trying to pass off whatever the results were as your original hypothesis. So you can see how that would be not reflective of what truly happened and or selective reporting. Underpowered studies, another QRP, is when we have studies with low statistical power. This could lead to there being false positives published in the literature. Underpowered studies could lead to unreliable results and erroneous conclusions. Bias against the null, sometimes called publication bias, where folks perform a study and have null or negative findings and then either don't even submit it to a journal, instead put it in their file drawer, or do submit it to a journal but get rejected by a journal because many journals only want to publish positive and exciting findings. But what happens with this is, one, it's very wasteful because folks may continue to run the same studies again and again, not knowing that it's been done before. So it could be repetitive. And then the by chance research ends up making its way to the published literature. And so those are what sees the light of day, even if they're by chance. And all of these other pieces that have null or negative findings are in the file drawer and less reachable to the public. PHacking, so this was talked about by Melissa when she was describing how Brian Wansnick's work has been kind of exposed So it's hard to explain p-hacking without also explaining p-values, which is a really challenging thing to explain. But to summarize p-hacking, it is sometimes referred to as data dredge or data fishing. Basically, it means that one analyzes the data to find patterns and then they present it as statistical significance. So they're performing statistical analysis on many different variables until they find something significant, and then they pass it off as their original hypothesis. So a little bit similar to HARK. So to address p-hacking, some folks have suggested that we distinguish between confirmatory and exploratory research. So there we go, we have pre-registration. And so that's really why pre-registration is thought to be helpful in terms of HARK and p-hacking. Pre-registration, you would set the stage for what you plan to study before your data collection. And so the power could be addressed there in your pre-registration when you're designing your methods in the hopes of not producing an underpowered study. Pre-registration could also help with bias against the null or file drawer problem because you're publicly committing to something. And so folks could find your pre-registration and say, hey, what was the outcome of that? And so it's giving some sunshine to these studies that may have null or negative findings. And for those of us who work on systematic reviews and meta-analyses, you're probably familiar with this, where we're digging through pre-registrations, registries, clinicaltrials.gov to see which studies have taken place and may not be published at all, or have taken a long time to be published. So if you have faculty or if you yourself happen to be looking for a place to register a study, there's some different places that you could choose from. The easiest one, in my opinion, is Center for Open Science because it's multidisciplinary and they have some pretty easy templates to follow. So now it's in my workflow that after I design a research study, alone or collaboratively, that we go to Center for Open Science and submit some registration. Center for Open Science allows folks to make these registrations available to the public immediately or an embargo period of up to 4 years. So if you are concerned about scooping, then that is an option for you. The first image I have here is American Economic Association's registry for RCTs. And the following ones you'll see on the slide are very discipline specific. So specific to economics or specific to clinical trials in the health sciences. Prospero is specifically for systematic reviews and meta-analyses in the health sciences. So when you're thinking about where to register a study, consider some have limitations and others are quite open. So where librarians kind of fit into this mix, we could influence pre-registration by educating our scholars on the benefits of registering. We could even suggest use of our venues like institutional repositories for hosting pre-registrations. And it could be just discussed in instructional settings or guides, like the role of pre-registration in the whole reproducible workflow. So as I've personally been registering studies and gotten in the habit of this, I would say that it's helpful in that it forces my collaborators and I to be on the same page. So like several times we'll be like, wait, what did we say in our protocol? And so we'll go back and make sure that we're following our original plan. It's also nice because our methods section is pretty much done. And so the methods section that you pre-register may be in like future tense, and you might need to change that to past or present tense in a paper, but it's pretty easy. And then I think that citing a pre-registration in the cover letter of a manuscript or even citing it within the manuscript itself demonstrates a level of rigor, and so the perception might be changed. This is a slide used by one of my colleagues, Randy McCarthy from Northern Illinois University. He's a colleague of mine through Study Swap. And this is a slide he uses to demonstrate that what you include in a pre-registration is very similar to what you would include in an IRB application. So if you do have human subjects, or if your faculty has human subjects in their research, a lot of that could be just transferred over to a pre-registration. So you think about it as like similar language that just could be copied and pasted. Okay, so quickly moving on to register reports. They're a little different than pre-registration in that it's on the journal side. So studies, the pre-registration would be submitted to the journal, and the journals would peer review before data collection, so before the experiment is run. And the editors and peer reviewers of a journal would either accept, reject, or ask for revisions of your registration. And if they approve of it and say, yes, we are happy with your methods, they give a conditional acceptance. So what they're saying is, we agree to publish this regardless of having null or negative findings, because we believe in your methods. So to date, there are 224 journals that either have a regular registered report submission track or have had registered report special issue or issues. So this is just a sampling. Notice Cochrane and Campbell collaboration. I know folks attending here, some of us are involved in systematic reviews, and so we may be familiar already that those are two venues that really prioritize protocols. One of the examples here is music related. We have plant science, psychology, health sciences, and so there's buy-in from a lot of different disciplines. But why not library science journals? Why don't any library science journals have registered reports? I believe that library science journals should at least have a special issue, if not add a complete submission track for registered reports. And in practice, this would just mean that they would change their author guidelines. It would also mean that there might need to be some training for editors and reviewers to get up to speed on how to review registration before a study has been run. And they would need to agree this conditional acceptance and promise to publish things regardless of whether or not there's null, negative, or positive findings. So if you feel as strident as I do about this topic, I have a Z link here, z.umn.edu LIS registered reports. And so if you want to add your name to this form, I'm going to construct a letter, and my first target is going to be college and research libraries. And so my idea is that we could collaboratively write a letter and have signatures and explain within the letter why we think this particular journal, CRL, should consider having a registered report submission track. Here's my references. I am done.